The movie starts with a dead woman lying on the bed, and her daughter is looking at her terrified. Dr. Rose Cotter wakes up from her nap in her office. A patient called Carl is waiting for her in the waiting room. He keeps thinking he's going to die. Rose tells him he's just having a panic attack, but Carl says he feels it's around him. Eventually, Dr. Rose puts Carl in observation, so the nurses can take care of him. A woman is brought in by an ambulance and her condition is urgent. Dr. Rose enters her without having an insurance, so she goes to Dr. Morgan, while he's upset that Dr. Rose didn't come to him first, to get things approved. Rose gets a new patient, Laura, who witnessed her professor killing himself with a hammer, and she's completely scared. Rose sits with Laura to talk about what happened. Laura says she sees things that no one else can. Sometimes this thing can look like a random stranger, or her grandfather, that died a long time ago. It wears people's faces like a mask. The thing is constantly smiling at her, in a creepy way. Rose thinks it's just a hallucination, but Laura assures that it's real. She says the thing told her that today is her last day. She becomes hysterical because Rose still thinks she's hallucinating. Suddenly she panics and jumps off her chair, and crawls backwards in fear while Rose is confused because no one is there. Rose goes to the phone to ask for help, but then, she realizes that Laura isn't on the floor. She looks to find her standing, while just smiling in a creepy way. She's also holding a jagged piece of the broken vase, then she slices her face and throat while smiling. She falls down while Dr. Rose is just staring in astonishment. Men come in to find Laura dead, but still smiling. Detectives Joel and Buckley come to investigate the accident. Rose explains to them what happened. She says that before Laura died, she was smiling. Laura's body is in the morgue and it looks like a smiley face. Rose goes home, takes a shower, and drinks alcohol to calm herself, but she starts imagining Laura. Her boyfriend Trevor comes and scares her. So she tells him what happened at work. They go out. Holly and Greg wonder if they're going to their son Jackson's birthday party this weekend. Rose can't go because she's working. She becomes upset with her sister Holly, and Holly's husband after they judged her for working to help people, not for money. Back at home, they turn on their home alarm, then prepare the cat's dinner. The next day, Rose is making coffee. She asks a nurse to get some files about Laura. Joel decides to stop by, to check on her. Apparently Joel is her ex-boyfriend. In her office, Rose reads up on Laura's report about her professor killed himself with a hammer. Then it says the professor smiled at her. Holly interrupts this by calling Rose to apologize for last night, and Rose apologizes too. Then, suddenly she sees Laura outside just staring at her. As she's walking in the hallway, Carl is just sitting down smiling. Rose goes to him, and wonders how he's doing, but he's just sitting still smiling. She tries to talk to him, but nothing works. Then, he starts saying he's going to die, and Rose is going to die. She panics and gets people to restrain him. Later, Dr. Morgan talks to her about overreacting with Carl. He thinks she's still traumatized from what happened with Laura, so he gives her a week off to get better. On her way home, Rose sees a toys store, so she goes to buy a model train, as a gift for her nephew Jackson. Back at home, she wraps up the model train for Jackson's birthday. She drinks some wine to calm herself, when suddenly her home alarm goes on. She drops her glass and grabs scissors to protect herself. She turns off the alarm, then realizes the back door is open. The security company calls her, and asks for the passcode. Then the security woman starts to talk creepy, and tells her to look behind her. Suddenly, Rose realizes she never had the call. When the phone rings again, she picks it up, and it's security asking for the passcode again. Police comes to her house, to make sure nothing is wrong. They find nothing out of the ordinary and Trevor comes home confused. Later, she calls for her cat, but it doesn't come. Trevor suspects something is wrong with Rose, but she says everything is fine. Later, Rose's cat still hasn't come home to eat. We see the woman in the beginning of the movie again. It seems to be a dream that Rose sees. She decides to get up and listen to the audio of Laura. She thinks she hears one part of the audio that says her name, and suddenly Laura appears and scares her. Rose grabs a knife, and Trevor is startled to see how disturbed Rose has become. The next day, Rose goes to her psychiatrist, Dr. Madeline Northcott. Rose feels guilty about Laura, and Madeline mentions that maybe Rose feels guilt because of her mother's suicide as well. Rose wants to get a prescription for anti-hallucinogens, but Madeline says that Rose seems normal at the moment. It's just lack of sleep, overwork and her trauma manifesting itself. Madeline tells her to continue her sessions, and to focus her mind on other things. And she doesn't give her the prescription. Rose goes to Jackson's birthday party. Jackson opens his gift from his Aunt Rose, and he's shocked to find a dead cat. Rose is shocked too, because it's her cat that she's been looking for. She tries to tell them that she didn't put her cat there. But suddenly she sees a guest smiling creepily. The guest gets right in front of her, so she falls back and screams in terror, realizing she injured herself on the glass table. Dr. Morgan visits Rose in the ER, and he says Rose needs to see a specialist. Meanwhile, Holly is describing what happened at the party to Trevor. On their way home, Rose tells Trevor everything. She thinks whatever was following Laura has now attached itself to her. Trevor doesn't believe her, and says that she probably inherited this from her mother. Later that night, Rose looks at the witness statement again, and searches for the Professor Gabriel Munoz. She sees Laura again, so she tries to just go to sleep. The next day, Rose goes to visit Gabriel's wife, Victoria. Victoria says that Gabriel was having conversations with himself, and she says that his face was fully disfigured when he passed. They go to his room, where Rose sees all these photos of smiling faces. Victoria recalls that Gabriel saw someone who killed themselves. Later, Rose goes to see Joel. She wants him to search for Gabriel's name in the police reports. The police report says Gabriel witnessed a woman named Angela Pohl, who killed herself a week before Gabriel did. Rose then gets him to search for Angela Pohl, and it shows that she too witnessed someone killing himself. There's video footage of a man using gardening shears to stab himself, in front of Angela. In the video, the man was smiling when he killed himself. She goes home to find her psychiatrist talking to Trevor. She feels betrayed by him, then shouts at her psychiatrist. She leaves to see Holly, and tells that she's cursed by an entity. Holly doesn't believe her and says this is exactly what happened to their mother. Rose goes to her car, and Holly comes back to her, but her head falls off deformed. Jackson notices how crazy Rose is through the window, because she's screaming while no one is actually at her window. Later, Joel calls Rose to say that there was a connection with Laura. It goes back to 20 cases but only 19 deaths. One case, a man kills someone, not himself. But the witness to the murder ends up killing themselves. She talks to Joel, who finds it hard to believe Rose, but somehow believes her. Joel tells her between each case it's about 4 days, which means today is her 4th day. After that, she goes to talk to the guy in jail. Rose talks to Robert Torley, and explains that she's asking for one of her patients. Robert says the only way to stop the chain is to kill someone and to have a witness. Then he goes crazy after knowing that she's asking for herself. Rose doesn't tell Joel what Robert said. Back at her house, Rose ignores a call from her psychiatrist. Then she begins to analyze the evidence that Joel printed for her. Madeline rings the door and Rose lets her in. Rose gets a phone call while talking to her psychiatrist, to be surprised that Madeline is on the phone. The fake Madeline starts to smile at her creepily, and says it's almost her time. Rose starts to walk backwards down the stairs as Madeline follows her. In her car, she takes a large knife before going to the hospital. The nurses are confused to see her, so she tells them that she forgot something in her office. She goes to Carl's room and Dr. Morgan interrupts them, but then, Rose suddenly pulls out the knife and stabs Carl multiple times. Morgan starts to scream, then he peels his face off. However, it was all a dream. Dr. Morgan finds Rose in her car, and wonders what she's doing. He says that he thinks Rose can't be alone right now. Rose finally realizes that's exactly what needs to happen, so the curse doesn't pass to anyone else. Joel wants to know her location, but she believes that the curse can't be passed, as long as there's no witness to her suicide. She arrives at her house when she was a little girl, and uses her keys to enter. The past shows a young Rose looking at her mom while she's dying in bed. She asks Rose to call for help, but young Rose runs away. Adult Rose then enters the same room. After that, she locks everything up so no one can enter the house. At night, she enters the room again, and sees someone on the bed. It's her mother. She apologizes to Rose, then blames her for not calling anyone for help, and she asks why Rose wanted her to die. Rose says she was just 10 years old and was afraid. Then, her mom creepily smiles, so Rose leaves. All of a sudden her mom is a lot taller, and chases her down the hallway, so Rose falls back. The oil lamp is now on the floor burning, so Rose grabs it and hits the creature. It begins to burn alive, so Rose leaves the house. The house burns down completely, and Rose decides to go to Joel, since it's now over. She apologizes to him for everything, and asks if Joel can stay with her while she sleeps. Joel says he'll stay with her forever. Then everything gets dark, and he starts smiling creepily. Rose slowly walks to the door, and Joel runs towards her. She leaves the place, but then realizes she's still at her house, and it didn't burn down. The real Joel arrives at the house. Rose goes back inside to keep Joel away, but the creepy tall monster is now there, and it takes out its skin. Then, it enters Rose through her mouth. Finally Joel is able to break in. He sees Rose standing there smiling. Then, she burns herself, while Joel is watching, so the curse continues.